Chris said he had taken drugs with Kelly the morning she went missing, but he said nothing bad or illegal happened. He stayed with his story. Kelly had left that morning, and that was all he knew. But while detectives were talking to him, one of them got a text from another detective who was watching video from the apartment building. The message was short and shocking. She did not leave. Welcome to 13th Hour Files. Today, we're looking closely at the sad case of Kelly Dwyer, a young woman from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, whose disappearance shocked the whole city and showed disturbing secrets that were hiding in plain sight. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments and hit subscribe, so you never miss a case we cover. Kelly Dwyer was 27 years old and had lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for the past 5 years. To everyone who knew her, Kelly was full of energy, a friendly person who worked 3 jobs but still made time for her friends. She loved the city's nightlife, trying new restaurants and local bars, and never let her busy schedule stop her from staying in touch with those she cared about. Her father, Tony, would often say that even on her busiest days, Kelly always reached out. "I love you so much, and I'm so thankful for you, and all of the things. And I don't want you to be sad because we're not talking. You can always pick up and call me. I'll call you right back if I don't pick up. But yeah, I love you. I hope to hear from you in the morning." Kelly was a positive person by nature. Her aunt said she was someone who could always find the best in people. She had an exciting energy that pulled people in and made them feel important. She loved travel and fitness. Kelly first showed talent in tennis as a child, but later found her love in yoga, eventually becoming a yoga teacher. She balanced her full-time job at Lululemon with teaching classes at a local studio and working part-time as a babysitter. Like many young adults, Kelly was active on social media and dating apps. For the past year, she'd been regularly seeing a 38-year-old man named Chris Sacco. Chris was a successful computer executive who had worked with the New York Yankees before moving to Milwaukee. Kelly told her dad she really liked him. Chris also kept a busy schedule. He worked long hours, loved sports, traveled often, and enjoyed the city's nightlife. On the night of October 10, 2013, Kelly and Chris went out together, going from bar to bar, sometimes meeting up with friends. But 2 days later, on October 12th, something just felt wrong. Kelly, who was normally very active online, sometimes posting several times a day, had suddenly gone quiet. Friends and coworkers started calling and texting, but every call went straight to voicemail. That same day, Kelly's boss at Lululemon, Karen, got worried when Kelly didn't show up for her shift. Karen tried reaching out to Chris, but got no answer. Eventually, he left her a voicemail saying he hadn't heard from Kelly either and guessed she might just be upset after an argument they'd had during their night out, but no one had seen or heard from her since. There were no phone calls, no social media updates, and not a single use of her bank cards. Kelly Dwyer was now officially missing. Chris told police that Kelly had come to his 18th floor apartment at Lafayette Towers on the evening of October 10th. According to him, they left his apartment just before 8 p.m. to look for cocaine, but came back without finding any. Afterwards, they went to a nearby bar called Allium, where they drank and talked with friends. At one point, Kelly told a friend she had the next day off and was planning to work out and do laundry. Nothing unusual after a night of going to bars and socializing. Chris and Kelly returned to his apartment around 2 a.m. Security camera footage would later prove this, showing the pair laughing and chatting as they entered the building together. Chris said they took drugs and had sex before falling asleep in his living room. He said that around 9 a.m. he heard the door close and thought Kelly had left. He said he hadn't seen or heard from her since that day. He was busy moving some sports equipment to his mother's house. But something about that story just didn't feel right to the people close to Kelly. Karen, her boss, told police that Kelly had seemed different in the weeks before she disappeared. She had lost noticeable weight. Her normally good work performance was getting worse. And one day she arrived at work with glassy eyes and seeming confused. Kelly blamed it on allergy medicine taken on an empty stomach. Still, nothing could explain her sudden disappearance. Her friends and family jumped into action, printing missing person flyers, searching the area, and doing whatever they could to find her. Karen kept talking with Chris over the phone. He sounded helpful, but when she met him in person at the store, her feeling changed. He offered only a brief, "I'm sorry for what you're going through." On the surface, it was polite, but to Karen, it felt empty. This wasn't just a casual friend. Chris had been an important person in Kelly's life for a year. She expected real emotion, sadness, concern, some clear sign that he was upset. But instead, there was a strange calmness about him, a distance that felt completely out of place. He didn't look desperate for answers. There was no worry in his voice, no searching in his eyes. It left Karen with a quiet but strong feeling that something was wrong. Kelly's father, Tony, admitted that while Kelly clearly really liked Chris, he had always felt uneasy about him, even though they'd never met in person. There was just something about the way Kelly spoke about Chris, or more accurately, the gaps in what she didn't say, that made Tony think something wasn't right. Chris always seemed hard to pin down, like there were parts of his life he kept hidden. As it turned out, those feelings were not wrong. Chris had actually been in a 3.5-year relationship with another woman named Megan, who believed they were only dating each other and heading toward marriage. Adding to the unease, Chris's mother, Joyce, told police she had never even heard of Kelly. Despite Chris and Kelly seeing each other regularly for a year, he had never once mentioned her to his own mother. That alone was disturbing. And with this new detail, all suspicions were beginning to focus on Chris. By all accounts, he was the last person known to have seen Kelly. His apartment building had 28 security cameras covering every entrance and exit. It should have been nearly impossible for someone to leave without being noticed. The footage confirmed that Kelly and Chris entered the building just before 3 a.m. on October 11th, laughing and talking casually. But if Chris's story was true, and Kelly left at 9 a.m., there should have been footage to prove it. Yet there was nothing, not a single clip showing her leaving. News clip, Wiesen, 12 News. Tima Ponton is live on Milwaukee's east side with the details just in overnight. Tima, well, we have just learned in the last hour that Kelly Dwyer's mother plans to come to Milwaukee today and meet with the police between 10:30 and 11 o'clock. And they do plan to speak to the media. We will keep you covered on what happened. This is one of the many posters hanging up in many businesses here on the east side of Milwaukee as the search for Dwyer continues. Now this is the apartment building here at the corner of Windsor and Prospect where Dwyer was last seen. Now authorities have been searching for Kelly Dwyer. This is the most awful, incredibly horrible thing anyone could ever go through. I don't know where my baby is. It had now been just over a week since Kelly was reported missing. And investigators were once again at Chris Zacco's apartment. This time with sharper thinking and much deeper suspicion than before. Despite everything happening around him, Chris still didn't seem particularly worried. He downplayed his connection to Kelly, telling police that their relationship was far more casual than she'd ever let on. According to him, they partied together a few times a week, nothing serious, just friends with benefits. He said Kelly was still active on dating apps and seeing other people. Chris even gave detectives names of other people he thought could somehow be connected to her disappearance, but the picture painted by Kelly's friends was very different. They said Kelly was much more interested in Chris than he was in her. Sure, she kept her options open, but at heart, she wanted something more serious. She had hoped Chris might eventually feel the same. Chris admitted to taking drugs with Kelly the morning she disappeared, but he said nothing illegal or harmful had happened. He stuck to his story. Kelly had left that morning, and that was all he knew. But while detectives were talking to him, one of them got a text from another detective who was watching security camera footage from the apartment building. The message was short and shocking. She did not leave. Kelly had never been seen on any camera leaving the building. She had entered on the morning of October 11th, and that was it. That single discovery completely changed the investigation. It raised the seriousness dramatically. Chris was no longer just a person of interest, he was now the center of something far more disturbing. Inside the apartment, detectives noticed something else that caught their attention. A number of drugs and drug items scattered throughout the space. It was enough to justify bringing Chris in for more questioning. Detectives hoped that under pressure, he might finally tell more. But the interview ended almost as soon as it began. Chris immediately asked for a lawyer. With a search warrant in hand, police returned to the apartment to do a much more thorough search. What they found shocked even experienced investigators. Yes, there were large amounts of drugs, but that wasn't the worst of it. On various hard drives and CDs, they discovered child abuse material, videos involving children as young as 2 years old. Officers later described it as some of the most horrifying material they had ever seen. More disturbing still was what they found on Chris's phone. He had filmed Kelly during a sexual act where she appeared to be struggling to breathe. She was blindfolded and tied up. The video had been taken just 3 weeks before she disappeared. Detectives couldn't even tell if she was fully awake, let alone aware she was being filmed. They found even more photos showing Kelly completely unconscious. Another hard drive contained violent pornography, all with choking themes. Then came a chilling discovery. The shower curtain in Chris's apartment had been ripped from its hooks and was missing. The bathroom smelled strongly of bleach. Investigators also searched Chris's car. Inside, they found a black leather glove, and on it, traces of Kelly's DNA. It wasn't definite proof of murder, but it was a major turning point. It was enough to justify taking action. With everything they'd found, police felt confident arresting Chris. They needed more time to dig deeper into what had really happened to Kelly Dwyer. News clip. And that breaking news, new child porn charges against Kelly Dwyer's friend. He is not charged in her disappearance. But Chris Zacco is facing 17 new counts of having child pornography on his computer. Chris was formally arrested and charged with possession of several controlled substances, including cocaine, hydrocodone, and oxy. He also faced charges for possessing child abuse material. By this point, police had officially labeled him a person of interest in Kelly's disappearance. Chris denied all charges and entered a plea of not guilty through his attorney. News clip. Mother has been in agony since her daughter vanished more than a month ago. It honestly gets harder every day to be hopeful. The longer it goes, yes, it's very hard to remain hopeful. It sounds like a cliche, but there are no words to say how horrible it is. I can't believe that I've survived a month without my daughter. Maureen Dwyer stood in front of a podium in the shadows of Chris Zacco's condo. Surveillance video captured her daughter Kelly walking into the building last month. But sources tell us it doesn't show her walking out. It is frustrating. But we continue to hold out hope that we will locate her, and we're not giving up. We're still considering this a missing persons investigation. Police believe Zacco may have been the last person to see her alive. Kelly's mum talked about their relationship. Did you know that? She talked about him. They had been seeing each other for almost a year. So again, a $10,000 reward is now offered in the casino conviction necessary. This family says that money will go to whoever can provide enough information that lets them know what happened to Kelly. We're live on the East Side tonight. Michelle Fury. Today's TMJ4. Well, let's hope this helps. Thank you, Michelle. As news of Chris Zacco's arrest spread across Milwaukee, there was one woman watching from home who knew she could no longer stay silent. Megan, Chris's longtime girlfriend, had been in a relationship with him for over 3 years. She had always believed they were only dating each other. But seeing his name tied to Kelly's disappearance on the news, Megan realized there was far more to Chris than she ever imagined. According to Megan, things had already started to feel strange around the time Kelly went missing. She was supposed to meet Chris for dinner on October 11th at 7:30 p.m., but he showed up over an hour late. His only explanation was that he'd been having phone problems. But his behavior that night was off. He was distracted, twitchy, constantly playing with his phone, barely talking. Police would later look at his phone data and discover that Chris had removed his SIM card for a full 17 hours, an unusually long time to be off the grid. Especially for someone whose girlfriend had just gone missing that night. Megan said Chris stayed over at her apartment. He was sweating through the sheets so much that she had to get up and change them. In fact, at 7 a.m. on October 12th, the very day Kelly was officially reported missing, Chris left Megan's home for what he claimed was a 160-mile round trip. He told her he was going to buy cheese for her parents. Megan found it strange, especially considering the timing. He returned that evening and again stayed over at Megan's place. Just like the night before, he was drenched in sweat. Megan later described their relationship as strained. Chris had been struggling with intimacy, and things between them had grown cold. She'd even been considering moving to Denver, where her family lived. But that day, during brunch, Chris suddenly changed his tune. Suddenly, he said maybe it was time for a change, and he might move with her. The entire conversation left her confused, but things became even stranger when police showed Megan photos from Chris's apartment. She'd been there many times before, and immediately noticed that key items were missing. The shower curtain, the towels, the bathroom rug all gone. She also pointed out something else. A large travel golf bag that Chris always kept near the bathroom. It was awkwardly placed, and always in the way. She remembered stepping over it regularly. Now, it was nowhere to be seen. Investigators took all of this seriously. Then came a turning point in the investigation. Police brought in a cadaver dog, hoping it might confirm what they had begun to fear. The dog reacted strongly in multiple locations. Chris's bed, the bathroom, the trash chute in the hallway, his parking spot, and the trunk of his car. For investigators, the implications were terrifying. Everything now pointed to one chilling conclusion. Kelly Dwyer was dead, and the man they had in custody had likely disposed of her body in that very golf bag. News clip. It's been 6 long weeks since Kelly Dwyer disappeared. Finally, her dad's facing his greatest fear. Do you not think Kelly's alive? I don't think she's alive. I don't think she's alive. It's getting harder every day. They're frustrated with the investigation. I think the Milwaukee Police Department has some wonderful people working there, and I think their hearts are in the right place, but for some particular reason, this case has not gotten the priority that it should. Kelly's boyfriend has not been arrested in her disappearance. However, Chris Sacco has been charged with keeping a drug house and 17 counts of possessing child porn. Prosecutors asked for $250,000 in bail, calling him a probable homicide suspect. Everything points to the fact that he did do something. In my heart of hearts, I believe he did something. The cadaver dog's reaction near the trash chute had Kelly or something of hers been thrown away that night. They spent days looking through a landfill, searching for any trace of her. News clip. News now. Milwaukee detectives will resume their search of a Menomonee Falls landfill for a 5th day today. They are still searching for any evidence in connection with the disappearance behind Kelly Dwyer. Chris was still in custody, but was later released while waiting for trial. During his brief time in jail, he reportedly made a disturbing confession to another inmate named Don Trail. According to Don Trail, Chris admitted to killing Kelly during what he called a rough sexual encounter. Even more disturbing, Chris allegedly tried to get the inmates' help in organizing a hit on an ex-girlfriend. Unfortunately, none of this could be used in court. The confession, disturbing as it was deemed not allowed. Chris eventually pleaded guilty to the drug charges, but he continued to fight the charges related to child abuse material. News clip. Portrayed in court documents as a wild guy using drugs and bondage during sex acts. Chris Sacco was rather quiet in the courtroom. At the hearing, the defense gained something: time. They want more time for their experts to study Chris Sacco's hard drive. Because of the nature of the alleged offenses, that analysis will require the expert to be, I guess, at the police department or at some facility the police department controls. Judge Belofsky agreed to give the defense a few extra days by April 2014. With still no sign of Kelly, the case was officially reclassified as a cold case. For her loved ones, it was devastating. A missing persons case is painful enough, but hearing the words cold case brought a new level of grief. There were no leads, no closure, just silence. Asterisk news clip. On New at noon today. A trial date has now been set for Chris Sacco. Maureen Dwyer got up at dawn to make sure she was at this court hearing for Chris Sacco. During the hearing, a June trial date was set. Although the charges don't relate to Dwyer, Dwyer's family is hopeful there'll be some resolution soon. He did something to Kelly, and we want him to tell us about it. He's guilty of sin and slow-moving process, and he's walking free while Kelly's body is decomposing. For several months, the case had gone cold. Kelly Dwyer was still missing, and although Chris Zacco had been convicted on 16 out of 17 counts of possessing child abuse material, her name had never even come up in court. Officially, the cases were considered unrelated. But for those closest to Kelly, and for the investigators who continued to quietly work the case, everything about her disappearance remained deeply tied to him. At Chris's sentencing hearing, prosecutor Sarah Hill made it clear to the court that Chris's involvement in Kelly's disappearance had not been forgotten. While the court couldn't consider her case during the child abuse trial, Sarah brought it up during sentencing, arguing that it spoke volumes about his character and the darkness surrounding his actions. Chris was sentenced to 19 years in prison. Yet, even in the face of mounting evidence, his mother, Joyce, protested his innocence. She told reporters there was nothing even remotely suspicious about the hard drives, claiming that Chris had simply taken old computer equipment home from a previous job and didn't even know what was stored on the devices. Her words reflected a mother's denial, but also the widening divide between what people believed about Chris Zacco. News clip. Kelly Dwyer vanished from her boyfriend's luxury heiries 1 year ago this week. As law enforcement shifted their focus to other cases, Kelly's parents refused to let go. They hired a private investigator who began retracing possible routes Chris could have taken on the day Kelly disappeared. 3 major areas in and around Milwaukee were flag locations that Chris might have passed through that day. But, in the end, the most disturbing evidence wasn't geographical, it came from the women who had once loved him. Several of Chris's former partners came forward, and their stories were deeply disturbing. What began as consensual intimacy quickly escalated into dangerous territory. They described acts of choking during sex. Some said he choked them without warning. Others claimed he ignored safety words and pushed boundaries that had never been agreed upon. One ex said she would often struggle to break free from him. Sometimes, she recalled, he would pinch her nose while choking her, cutting off all air. When she finally gasped for breath, Chris would shower her with praise, telling her she'd done a good job, saying he wanted her, offering the kind of approval that filled a void she hadn't realized was there, making her feel needed even if it came at a terrible cost. At the time, she admitted, it fed something she craved, but the fear crept in fast. There was one night, she said, where she genuinely feared she might die. The trauma from that experience was so deep that she chose not to be named publicly. She described a violent sexual assault, one that haunted her long after it ended. She said if she had resisted any harder, she wasn't sure she would have survived. Investigators learned that Kelly, too, had occasionally opened up to friends and co-workers about exploring a more adventurous sex life. But what Chris had documented on his phone, the photos painted something far darker. It became clear that what he pursued wasn't about trust or consent, it was about control. Another woman, known only as Miss C, told investigators she had met Chris on Craigslist. They had discussed entering a dom-sub dynamic with strict boundaries, but Chris broke those rules almost immediately. He disregarded their agreed-upon safe words. One night, she said, he pinned her down and raped her while her children were sleeping in the next room. That was the last time she ever saw him. With the accumulation of these testimonies, police began refining their theory. Kelly may have died during one of these violent encounters, an interaction that crossed the line from extreme to fatal. Still, without a body, they had no way to prove it. For 19 months, Kelly Dwyer's disappearance left her loved ones in relentless pain and uncertainty. The city's hope for answers faded until one call changed everything. It began on a quiet, overgrown stretch of rural road. A local resident driving along a dead end noticed something tangled in the brush on the embankment. What appeared to be a human skull, partially hidden by weeds and earth, chilled him to the core. He called the authorities immediately. When investigators arrived, their fears were confirmed. They uncovered a nearly complete human skeleton, mostly intact except for a few missing finger bones. The right leg was rotated inward, the left arm bent behind the ribs and spine frozen in a final unnatural pose. News clip, Tony Dwyer says. He's not jumping to conclusions. The nature of this entire thing has been so painful, so long, and impacted so many people, that to have a gut reaction on any part of it is at best premature, and why we do our best not to speculate. It's been a year and a half, it's a very, very long time. Now, Dwyer is waiting for a forensic odontologist to review old dental records to determine if the female skeleton with good teeth may be his firstborn. Certainly, it would be closure. The one goal that we've had since the beginning is to bring Kelly back, to give her a respectful burial, funeral, an opportunity for her mother and her sister. There were no clothes, no personal belongings, nothing to help identify the victim. For days, the remains went unidentified. On May 1, 2015, dental records confirmed the worst. The skeleton was Kelly Dwyer. News clip. The police hadn't been the ones to find her, but their theory about her possible location had been right. She was found just over 10 miles from where Chris Zacco had bought a pair of shoes the day after Kelly vanished. She was missing for a year and a half, and now her family has to suffer through a big waiting period until forensic analysis can determine how Kelly Dwyer died. 19 months had passed since Kelly was last seen alive. Time and exposure to the elements made it impossible to determine an exact cause of death. Soil samples showed her body had stayed in that spot since soon after she disappeared. News clip, today. Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm and investigators from both Milwaukee and Jefferson counties met to discuss evidence and where the investigation goes from here. There's a lot of work to be done still, and we don't have a lot of answers. As investigators continue their work, friends and family remember Kelly. I'm sure it's such a relief to her family to at least have some closure so they can start their healing process. With Kelly's identity finally confirmed, detectives reclassified the case as an active homicide. The timeline built from witness statements, digital footprints, and physical evidence became the backbone of their case. Detectives believe the nightmare began sometime between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. on October 11th. After a night out, Kelly Dwyer was killed inside Chris Zacco's apartment. What happened next suggested both calculation and desperation. Police theorized that Chris wrapped Kelly's body in his own shower curtain. He then forced her remains into his travel golf bag. In the early morning, Chris wheeled the bag down to his underground parking garage. It was here, at this critical moment, that a large fan happened to block the only security camera aimed at his parking spot at 10 a.m. Chris drove away from his building. 2 minutes later, Kelly's phone, which would never be recovered, connected to a cell tower near Chris's apartment, its final signal. By 10 a.m., Chris had returned, staying for only a short time before leaving again hours later, around 6:15 p.m., to visit his mother. In the interim, he removed the SIM card from his phone, a move that would keep his digital footprint hidden for the next 17 hours. Later that night, Chris joined Megan and some friends for dinner, staying at Megan's condo while his car with Kelly's body still inside remained parked across the street. The following morning, October 12th, Chris embarked on what he claimed was a 160-mile round trip to Madison, allegedly to buy cheese for Megan's parents. Investigators believe this was when he disposed of Kelly's body. He pushed her remains down a wooded embankment with a black glove, one of many pieces of evidence that would never be recovered, along with the golf bag, shower curtain, bathroom rug, towels, and Kelly's clothes. By noon, there was nothing left in Chris's car to betray what had happened. The last trace of Kelly was gone. Chris put the SIM card back into his phone and drove another 13 miles to purchase a pair of shoes, a purchase made with his own credit card, providing police with a timestamp and location. Almost immediately, he began responding to texts and calls from Kelly's boss, Karen, and even sent messages to Kelly's phone as if nothing had happened. That night, he returned to Megan's and stayed over, even suggesting the next morning that they should move away together. From start to finish, Chris's movements revealed a man trying to stay one step ahead, removing evidence, avoiding cameras, and manipulating those around him. Yet despite his calculated efforts, he left behind a web of clues, digital trails, eyewitness accounts, and the enduring suspicion of those who knew Kelly best. The investigators' careful reconstruction of that weekend would become the heart of their case against him. Chris Zacko pleaded not guilty to every charge brought against him. The process of bringing this case to trial was full of uncertainty. One detective admitted in front of cameras, "It's definitely going to be a tough case to present, but it's strong. It's a very unique case. It's all circumstantial. It's a case where you need to read between the lines." Chris's father and his mother, Joyce, continued to defend him throughout the proceedings. His father told reporters, "I consider my son a man of above-average intelligence. If he'd done what the police claim, wouldn't he have purged his apartment of any contraband or compromising material before his trial?" Yet even before the trial began, Chris got into further trouble when corrections officers found violent and hardcore pornography in his cell and confiscated it. The mood in the courtroom was somber. Details shared by people who take the stand are painful to hear for Kelly Dwyer's family. Today, friends of Dwyer took the stand, as well as more MPD investigators. Karen Horton was Kelly Dwyer's boss at Lululemon, who eventually found Chris Zacko's number and called him after Dwyer didn't show up for work. Karen says Zacko came to Lululemon shortly before a group was meeting to post flyers with Kelly's photo. Zacko didn't stay to help and said, "I'm so sorry for what you're going through. And at that point I just again got a very strong body sensation and thought, like, I don't trust him." At least twice he had asked if police looked at the videos, the surveillance tapes from the apartment. MPD Detective Eric Olbrinson shared some of the surveillance video from Zacko's apartment building. Garage opens the trunk, and then he will grab the bag that he is pushing this in, objecting. Attorneys for Zacko argue that the cameras don't show everything. Speculation is not enough, and evidence does not directly link Zacko to Dwyer's death. Chris did not testify, but his defense team had an answer for everything. They were as confident as the prosecution. They knew Chris's phone had been off with the SIM card removed for 17 hours. But the defense insisted it was purely coincidence. During those 17 hours, Chris bought the pair of shoes using his credit card. The defense argued, if Chris was technically smart enough to not be traced using his phone, why would he leave a credit card trail for them? As everyone knew, Kelly was never seen coming out of his building. Each exit was covered by a camera, and the only other way out was through the parking areas, also under surveillance. There was absolutely no footage of her leaving. Lady Defense claimed her body had to have been taken out using the no missing golf bag. Chris's lawyers said he, in fact, was also never seen leaving with said golf bag. He was only spotted driving in and out of the building. A truck had been covering his parking spot at the very time he would have loaded the bag in, and there were no cameras by the lift he would have had to use to get to the bottom floor. The cameras, however, did show Chris leaving at 10 a.m., likely to dispose of Kelly's phone. When he returned, less than 15 minutes later, he briefly opened his trunk, where a white or grayish-colored item could be seen inside. Prosecutors said this was consistent with that very travel bag. It also couldn't be ignored that the cadaver dog had reacted in that exact spot of the parking area, as well as inside of his car. They said even though they didn't have the exact moment he placed the travel bag in his car on film, there was enough to prove the bag existed. Daz Megan had seen it and Kelly was forced inside of it. She had been inside the back of his car. Megan testified, as did the detectives and other people Kelly had been with. After 9 days, both sides rested their cases. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict. Count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant, Chris Zacko, guilty of strangulation and suffocation. Today on Live at 4, jury found Chris Zacko guilty in the death of Kelly Dwyer. Nearly 5 years after Kelly was last seen, Chris Zacko was found guilty on all counts. When it came to sentencing, the defense continued to argue that everything between the pair had been consensual, and that Kelly willingly went back to his apartment that morning. They suggested Chris should receive a 22-year sentence, but the judge did not agree. He said the way Chris handled the situation from start to finish told him everything he needed to know about Chris's character, as well as the other charges Chris was already serving time for. The judge said a 22-year sentence would be too much of a risk to the community, and, in fact, wanted to give him more than even the district attorney had asked for. He deserves to live a long, long life in jail, hopefully tortured by the choices he's made. Along with her father and sister, Kelly Dwyer's mother asked the judge for the maximum sentence. When your daughter goes missing for a year and a half with no clue as to where she is, that is torture beyond belief. The most aggravating factor is not only taking the life of that child, but also of trying to hide it in a demonic way. He added that, even if it had initially been consensual, two things could be true at the same time. What started out as consensual became an utter disregard for human life. Chris ended up choking the life out of his victim for his own self-gratification. The judge said that if Kelly or Chris's other exes were into the same things as he was, sexually, that justified nothing about the way they had been treated. The key should always be safety, mutual respect, and understanding between people when it comes to boundaries and consent. Chris clearly did not care about any of those things, something his exes could all testify to many times over. The judge also emphasized how long it would have taken Kelly to die. Chris could have stopped, or at least called for help if he was concerned at any point. He didn't do that. He carried on until she was dead, and then covered it all up, continuing on with his life like nothing had happened. The prosecution said this, combined with the ex's testimonies and the child abuse material found all over his apartment, showed that he was an incredibly dangerous individual who cared for little but his own sexual gratification. News clip. After years of going unsolved, the man found responsible for the death of Kelly Dwyer will spend 31 years in prison. In 2018, 43-year-old Chris Zacco was sentenced to 31 years in prison, followed by 19 years of extended supervision. This was added to the 19 years he was already serving for possession of child abuse material and drugs, meaning he will likely die in prison. He appealed against his conviction for possession of child abuse material and drugs. But in 2019, this was denied, and his conviction was upheld. He also appealed against all the convictions related to Kelly, saying there had been errors in the court case and he deserved a new trial. But in 2023, this was also denied. It had been a long and difficult process for Kelly's friends and family, worrying for years that this might never get solved. And even with Chris's conviction, it brought little peace to anyone, but they could at least give Kelly a proper burial and say goodbye to her. Even with the verdict delivered and Chris Zacco behind bars, the scars left by Kelly Dwyer's disappearance and murder would never fully heal. For her family, the relief of seeing justice served was always tempered by the pain of losing her. For months after the trial, there were calls for better safety measures in apartment complexes and more attention to missing persons cases. Advocates for women's safety cited Kelly's case as a reminder of the dangers many still face and the importance of speaking up and supporting survivors.